Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the fantasy preview edition for NFL Week 9. We got Joe Flacco taking back over. We've got the Browns looking like a live wire now that Jameis Winston is back under center. We've got a lot of injuries to unpack as well. We got Deontay Johnson on the move to Baltimore. Tons to get to today. Start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John Flintstone. That is my trusty co-host, Mario Puig. Today, we are going through the entire NFL Week 9 board. And what better place to start than the game that is taking place later this evening? We've got the Houston Texans going up against the New York Jets. And this is one that is sending the gambling folks into a tizzy because the Jets are moribund. The Jets are 2-6. The Jets are bad. They're favored by 1.5 points at some shops, even 2.5 points against the Houston Texans. Now, to be fair, the Texans are a little bit shorthanded, especially when it comes to its group of pass catchers, with unfortunately Stephon Diggs going down for the season, Nico Collins still on injured reserve. But does this line make sense to you? And what does this Texans offense need to do to kind of recalibrate now that they're down two, legitimate stars at receiver?
Yeah, I think the line makes sense. The Jets are still kind of a mess, certainly a joke, but the Texans had a certain plan going into this year, and by injuries, that plan has been largely negated. So it's not as if we would have had the particular expectations for the Texans that we did if we were supposing that they didn't have Nico and Diggs. So their offense kind of just sucks now. Unfortunately, maybe that would change when Nico is back, but Tank Dell again is kind of on a little bit of a fraud watch right now. It's like he's really struggling this year, and I don't know if there's like a real excuse for it. So if Dell can get going like he did last year, then the Texans have a shot. And if he doesn't, I don't think they do. The Texans also are thin at corner, some crucial spots like that. You can't be perilously thin at both receiver and corner and then just kind of expect generally to do well. Those are two really bad conditions to take as a given.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is a Texans team that I was very bought in on coming into the season. I know you were as well.
Yeah.
And the offense, I mean, even when it was at full strength, when Collins was there, it looked about what we expected. But since Collins has been out, it's been a little bit clunky as far as this offense goes. And, even
Collins
if
was so outrageously productive is the thing. It's like we would look at his numbers and be like, how is he doing this? Catching like 85% of his targets at like 12 yards per target, and he's drawing a target every 5 snaps. That's crazy. And that was very true. And like the consequent takeaway of that is, well, if they don't have this guy, they're just kind of dead on arrival then. And they are like, you can't budget this offense to make much sense. I will say, I do think Xavier Hutchinson can get going a little bit more if they consider him in the slot where Diggs is missing now. Hutchinson would project better there than on the boundary in the Collins type reps, but they don't have anybody for the Collins types reps either way. Like that's just a foregone loss.
Exactly. So that's almost like a decoy role here going forward. As far as the Jets side of this game is concerned, what are we looking at from a fantasy perspective?
Yeah, like I said, the Texans are pretty thin at corner. I say that even if Lassiter's back, I don't really care. I don't think he should be starting on the boundary, especially for an NFL playoff competitor. But going against let's see. So Lazard being out, that I think that's kind of inconsequential given that it was more about what the Jets get going on the outside anyway. As we saw last week, or maybe saw last week, the Texans' run defense is not quite on the level that we've gotten used to, especially as long as Azeez Al-Shaair is out. That would maybe remain the case. And if Breece Hall can get going just a little bit, then I think the Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams tandem will prove to be a lot more than what the Texans can get going on their end.
I would have to Imagine so as well. I like the Jets here in this spot. It feels bad to say that, but it's just the Texans are that shorthanded at this point. So I mean, recalibrating on short rest, even with how the Jets have played, I still think that they have an edge over the Texans here. Let's get on over to the Sunday board. We've got the Cowboys and the Falcons. Falcons 2.5 point favorites at home. The Cowboys really kind of fighting to salvage their season right here.
Yeah, I don't know if they have it in them, especially given that, the kinds of reasons that a team would normally have to buy in and really rally in the face of adversity. I don't know if any of those reasons would apply for Dallas. Like, no one likes the coach. They do like the quarterback, I think. I do think the players, like the other players, but they know that the whole thing is being run by Jerry Jones, who's kind of losing his mind. So the Falcons, they certainly have to take the game seriously. It's not like Dallas is going to lay down exactly, but I don't know why we would pick Dallas to win a game against most teams. And the Falcons, I know they've been up and down week to week, but and a lot of their ups have coincided with going against the Buccaneers, who have a terrible pass defense. But I do think the general idea of Kirk Cousins will improve there with time will hold true. And so a game like this, I have to think, better for Cousins' chances than a month ago.
I think so too. I think Dallas's defense is very gettable. I think this is a great spot for Atlanta. You know, they're at home. Cousins, like the splits kind of speak for themselves over the course of his career. Like being at home, playing in the early window, the results tend to be really kind of explosive. So I feel like he's really set up for a good game, and kind of everything else is going to flow from there. Pitts is really coming on nicely. Drake London, one of the more bankable receivers right now, especially, you look at the kind of carnage in the top 15. If you look back at the ADP, he's been one of the best picks you could have made from draft season. So it's all looking up. And I think that additionally, this is a Cowboys team that has really struggled to stop the run. I know Parsons isn't quite at 100%. We'll see if he's out there for this game. So I feel like this is a good game for Bijan, of course. I like his props
All
this week.
Falcons offense, because also Dallas can't run the ball, so they're liable to end up in a pass heavy script just in general, and especially if they fall behind for whatever reason, which could be the kind of script that gets both teams over 70 snaps or something like that.
Yeah, I'm looking at a high scoring game here. I think, Vegas agrees with that. We've got an over under at 51 and a half, 52, depending on where you're looking. And I think that this game, it has the ingredients to definitely live up to that. But, if Dallas is in that pass heavy script outside of CeeDee Lamb, this feels like a tough matchup for Jake Ferguson going up against that safety rotation that Atlanta has. Is this somewhere where maybe Jalen Tolbert could get on the radar?
It could be, and part of the tasks of the Atlanta safeties, I think, is not just tight end coverage and like assistance in the run game or running back coverage, but also giving cover fire for Mike Hughes, who I assume is still starting on the boundary opposite AJ Terrell. So yeah, CeeDee Lamb, by the way, I think this sets up to be a one of those monster games for him. And yeah, it looks like Mike Hughes is still starting. There's no way that guy is getting by like he has without a lot of safety help. So it might be the case that the Falcons are kind of left with the choice of like, do you want to keep someone over Hughes, which is probably going to be most of the time Tolbert, or do you want to maybe put that safety on Jake Ferguson, who's kind of more by design the wide receiver 2 for Dallas anyway? I don't know. But I do think one of Ferguson or Tolbert should get going, and there might be room for both, especially if Dak goes over something like 40 pass attempts. There's room for somebody other than CeeDee Lamb, even with Lamb taking upwards of like a third of their targets.
I think given buys and injuries in spots where I do have Jalen Tolbert this week, I feel like this is it's almost like a now or never as far as starting him is concerned. So I'm going to throw him in there. And
you'll never feel totally comfortable about Tolbert. He's one of those guys that you draft as a backup for a reason, but it's like if you got to go with them, yeah, not a bad time too.
That's what I'm thinking. Before we get on over to the next game, we've got a message from our pals over at Underdog. We're proud to partner with Underdog Fantasy for the NFL season. Underdog is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. In addition to their popular best ball contests, Underdog also offers great DFS pick'em games. Pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. You can win up to 1,000 times your money in a single night by picking between 2 and 8 players to build a pick'em entry. This week, using the RotoWire picks and props tool, which highly recommend. We also have an app for that. Using that as my kind of jumping off point, I do like the higher than 252.5 passing and rushing yards for one Jalen Hurts. I also am into the higher than 23.5 receiving yards for Bijan Robinson, and getting a little spicier. I like Lucas Kroll over 13.5 receiving yards. I think that's a gettable number for Mr. Kroll this week against a leaky Ravens group of safeties. Sign up with RWNFL to claim your free pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Visit underdog.com or find them in the App Store. And don't forget to register using my promo code RWNFL to claim your free pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. You got to be 18 or older to play, 21 or older if you're in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 or older in Alabama and Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Are you concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. If you're in Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. That's 1-800-639-8783 or text NEXT STEP to 53342. If you're in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. All right, onward as we move through this Week 9 slate. We've got the Broncos and the Ravens in Baltimore. Ravens 9-point favorites in this one. Ravens coming off of a loss that kind of exposed the weakness of that team being the secondary. The question is, does Denver have the goods to really exploit it? Because I think in the games that the Ravens have lost, they've save the Gardner Minshew game. I don't even know what to really make of that. But generally speaking, the secondary lets down when it absolutely cannot afford to. Last week, to be fair, no Marlon Humphrey, no Nate Wiggins. I think that should change this week. But
Hamilton usually makes that one play, so it's like usually they get out of even that situation. But anyway, they got work to do, clearly.
Yes, they do. I don't know if it's a Zach Orr issue as far as the defensive coordinator is concerned, or a personnel one. They benched Marcus Williams. I don't know what's going on there. That's looked like a rare free agent boondoggle for this team, but I digress. Your read on this game, and I think the kind of fantasy headline right now would be Lamar Jackson versus this secondary and the fit of Deontay Johnson in this passing game.
Yeah, I guess it's possible that Johnson helps out. I just don't know how they put all three of Bateman, Johnson, and Flowers on the field in a 3-wide set. If they do, I would assume Flowers is in the slot, or maybe even Bateman. But to me, the Ravens needed someone who stretched the field vertically, because even with Deontay Johnson there, at best, you're kind of breaking the defense, that you're breaking up in the field into kind of like silos with vertical caps on them, because Deontay Johnson's not pushing 10 yards very, very often. Bateman, of course, is not built to do it, even though he is by default their main deep route guy. So if it's one of those things like they're just plugging in Deontay to Bateman snaps, I kind of hate that, actually, because he's even slower than Bateman. Not that Bateman's slow, not that Johnson is either, but they don't have vertical speed. So we'll see. If Johnson pushes off Aguilar's reps, then that is a positive, I think. Even if Bateman still isn't going downfield or whatever, it's like getting Aguilar off the field for Deontay Johnson is a positive, whatever way it must work out. But Mark Andrews is still their main downfield viable target, which is not great. We'll see if the Keaton Mitchell situation keeps turning for the better. I think Keaton Mitchell is pretty great if he's healthy. I don't know what a fair expectation is, because that injury looked really awful. But I would love for him to come back full strength, because if you have an over like a just ridiculously overdriven running game like the Ravens would have with Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, and full strength Keaton Mitchell, then I start to worry less about the spacing concerns. Then it's like, well, who cares? You're going to steamroll everybody. What does it matter if the defense is crowding the line? But yeah, I think they take this game easily, but I'm not expecting big numbers from Lamar. I think they, even aside from the injury thing, they probably want to just give him some general cover and, get this win without showing many of your cards that you have to play, because this isn't the time to show what you can do. Just get the easy win.
And Nix has been a guy who runs pretty hot and cold. Obviously, had the good game last week, but Nick Whalen and I were talking about this on the betting podcast earlier, where it's like the Broncos have had pillowy schedule of late. I mean, you're playing the worst possible iteration of the Saints on that Thursday night game. Then you get the Panthers at home last week.
It's the Panthers worse than they've ever been, and they've been so bad for so long. This is the worst they've ever been, easily.
I mean, even like the 2001 season, 2002, something like that. Like they were
the 0-16 Lions must have been better. Like, there's just no way that a team has ever been worse than this. It's completely impossible.
It's hard to watch. So therefore,
the Broncos might be in that conversation if it weren't for the Panthers.
They're funky. They've been really good on the road, and the defense is good. But
the defense is good. I got to give them that. And I do think Nix has a shot. It's just kind of like, this is clearly like a misadventure that we're going through in the meantime. Like, maybe he comes out okay, but this is basically like a guy falling down a hill, endlessly.
Reminds me of the great cinematic endeavor Hot Rod, where Rod is doing his punch dancing in the forest and takes a big spill down a hill. Like I mentioned in the underdog read, however, I do like the idea of Lucas Kroll a little bit. Whichever tight end is getting snaps for Denver, I do think that the safeties are a weak point of this Baltimore secondary. So that's something to consider. Maybe if you need to like jam in a low priced player on DFS, that type of thing. I don't know if I'm rolling him out there in my redraft lineups necessarily. Onward to Buffalo, we've got the Bills and the Dolphins. We've got the Bills checking in as 5.5, sometimes 6-point favorites, over under at 49. Tua has not been great up in Buffalo. I know that there's been a couple of times that he's missed the games up there. That they did get the cold water thrown on them last time in Buffalo. The Dolphins, I think, were off to that rocket hot start last year, and then Buffalo just kind of boat raced them. I believe Josh Allen is 7-0 straight up against the Dolphins.
I was going to say, he must have like 42 touchdowns in his last like 6 games against them.
Yeah, he tends to really kind of raise his level and against the Dolphins. So even with Miami looking competent-ish, I was very bullish on them last week against the Cardinals. Obviously, that didn't pan out. I think the offense can do some things here, but I think defensively they're going to have a hard time keeping a lid on Buffalo.
Yeah, I do think Mike McDaniel's head is kind of spinning a little bit too. I don't want to say he can't work his way through it, but this is by far the most challenged he's been at any point, and it's not as if in my opinion, it's not as easy. It's not easy to assume he could just kind of fix it all when Tua does have real limitations, and especially if like Hill's playing limited. The magic of last year is not easily recreated just because all the same people are there. But more importantly than whatever's going on with the Dolphins, I think is what's going on with the Bills, which is that they're clearly improving. Like, you had reason to project for a rookie like Keon Coleman that he would be better in the second half of the year than in the first half, and we're kind of at the second half. Maybe he's getting a little bit better. Even if he hasn't, he might get better soon. Khalil Shakir getting healthier, Amari Cooper getting folded into the intricacies of the offense. The Bills are just a lot different with Cooper than without, and it went badly for the Dolphins last time. Maybe the Dolphins can kind of fight back a little more this time, but I don't see the Dolphins defense having any meaningful success here, and I'm not going to take it for a given that the offense does either. I think kind of Bills, if they've gotten this far with the record that they have and are just now adding Cooper, just now getting Shakir healthy, they should be able to just kind of, take a game like this pretty decisively, I think.
Yeah, and I really do think that, Cooper just makes everyone's life easier. And I think also that Coleman does kind of look like he's starting to figure some things out, and that he's earning the trust of Josh Allen a little bit more on a week-to-week basis. So, I think it's totally wheels up for them. And, just rounding it out on the Miami side, Tyreek Hill, I think, is still a guy you're starting, but Jalen Waddle having the slow week last week, do you feel like you can throw him back in there just yet?
Yeah, I think a game like last week is basically bad luck for Jalen Waddle. Not that it doesn't reflect some real issues with the Dolphins, which is just that, Tua is not that great. The Bills have generally had their number, like you said. So Jalen Waddle is not like a must start in my opinion, but if you have to, it's not something worth fretting over in my opinion. He is definitely the type of talent who can transcend bad circumstances, even if they are bad.
Right, and he has the skill set to where, if a defender slips, like house call from distance, and all of a sudden, you're happy that you threw him in your lineup. Next game up, we've got the Saints and the Panthers. Got the Saints 7.5-point favorites on the road. I think that implies that Derek Carr should be good to go, but obviously the Saints have been a little bit rough to watch, and even since the last time that we saw Carr out there, losing Rashid Shaheed for the season, obviously a difficult thing for them to overcome. I don't know. Our guy Waylon was pointing to the potential of it being a Taysom Hill week a little bit in New Orleans. I think that's a possibility here. Your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Taysom Hill, I guess, is the Saints version of like running up the score on you. So playing the Panthers has a way of bringing out that kind of situation. Yeah, especially if Ikem Ekwonu's out, and the Panthers are just the worst team pretty much ever. So I don't know what. Maybe Chuba Hubbard can keep going. The Saints' run defense has been really bad. There's certain promise in it. Certainly receivers like Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker even. But this Panthers team looks like an NFL Europe squad, and the Saints can be one of the worst teams in the league and still take care of an NFL Europe team.
Yeah, I would say so. This is Ryan Fire looks from from the Carolina Panthers these days. It's not great. I imagine this one will be buried pretty significantly on the old red zone this week. What do you think of Jalen Coker though moving forward? I know I was looking at free agents in our staff dynasty league and was miffed but not surprised that you had scooped him. Your thoughts on how he's progressing, especially now that Deontay's out of the picture.
Yeah, I didn't have my eye on Coker at all going into the year, or let alone out of the draft. So I kind of overlooked him. Definitely a fringe prospect type. Like he's a little older, like he's basically a 50-year type age, and I don't know what Holy Cross is, but I assume it's a pretty low level of competition. But pretty good athletic testing from Coker. So, and he was super, super productive at Holy Cross at a 6'1", 208, running a 4.57, which is not great, of course, but his 10-yard split was above average. His vertical 42.5 elite, 128-inch broad jump, which is really good. So I figure at worst, Jalen Coker is something like the next like Jarrett Dillard or something, but he might be better than that too. And it's not as if Jonathan Mingo has done anything to warrant usage. I don't think David Moore is ever going to turn into that guy. It's pretty much just Jatavian Sanders and Legette who are drawing targets. And I don't know. In the slot is where Coker tends to work, and maybe by virtue of that, he can have more dependable output than the other two, or at least Legette from this point.
Right. If Young's back there, you probably want the guys that are running the shorter A-dot type of routes. He doesn't seem to be able to get to those longer shots where someone with Legette's skill set would theoretically be more in line to flourish. Before we get on over to our next game, we got a message from our friend Nick Whalen, and he's got some stuff to tell you about DK Pick Six.
We're proud to be brought to you by DraftKings Pick Six. So many NFL offerings each week over at Pick Six. Been enjoying playing on the Pick Six platform each and every week of the NFL season. Think a certain quarterback will throw for more than 300 yards. How about your favorite receiver scoring a touchdown? Check out Pick Six, the newest way to play fantasy football and win cash right now with DraftKings. Here's how it works. Just pick 2 to 6 players of the same sport and choose if they'll have more or less of a given stat: yards, catches, touchdowns, etc. Lock in those picks and compete against opponents for a shot at huge cash prizes. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use our code ROTOPICK. That's ROTOPICK. Again, RotoPick, ROTOPICK. If you're a new Pick 6 customer, play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Just use that code RotoPick. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-78-89-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Look at that. We're back and we're on to Cincinnati. We got the Bengals. We got the Raiders. Got the Bengals, who have yet to cover at home this year. They might are they winless at home this year? It's been tough for the home fans of the Bengals, but the Raiders may be the cure-all there. We've got the Bengals checking in as 7-point favorites in this one.
Yeah, man, Tom Telesco is a real jerk. Do you see how they have Harrison Bryant playing as a blocking specialist tight end now? We got the 240-pound 6'6" tight end who sucks to be a blocking specialist. Like, he's built like a twig. We're gonna put him right in there. What a terrible guy Tom is. Anyway, yeah, the Bengals should be able to take care of business here. They're not good, but they don't need to be. No one really needs to be to beat the Raiders. I think the situation is really unfortunate with the Raiders, especially for Antonio Pierce, because I don't think Pierce could have done anything to stop this, whatever kind of show we would call this that the Raiders have going. And, Tom Telesco is just going to blame that guy after the season. Like, oh yeah, well, it's too bad. We tried with Antonio Pierce, but he's just too defensive minded, and he couldn't win with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, so he can't be good. But in any case, yeah, the T. Higgins, if he's out again, this is not one of those games where I would worry so much about Jamar Chase, like, struggling through overexposure. He can both. He both might see 40% of the targets for the Bengals and be well prepared to give them, big returns on those. The only good corner for the Raiders is Nate Hobbs at this point. Anyway, is Nate Hobbs. So just get him away from Hobbs, and Chase should be able to get going. And short of that, Chase Brown game, definitely, maybe even a Zach Moss game, even though it's kind of painfully apparent by now that Brown is better.
It seems like Burrow is lobbying a little bit for rookie Jermaine Burton. Maybe this is catching my eye.
That's interesting that they got him going last week. Yeah, I kind of overlooked that. But it was like, yeah, this is exactly what he's supposed to do. And this is exactly why you drafted him. It's precisely what you don't have without him. Just even if he's an idiot, put him on the field. Get that safety to actually turn and run downfield for once. Yeah,
like make putting up with him during the week worthwhile when he's actually good on Sundays. I think that Yoshivas is an interesting player and everything, but statistically speaking, he's had one of the more empty.
Yeah, he's a backup.
Yeah, so I think Burton definitely has a talent advantage on him, and you spend a day 2 draft pick on Burton. I think he's clearly ready. Like when he's got an opportunity, he's made big plays. So. Especially if Higgins.
No one has ever griped about his abilities. They're like, no. I hate working with him. I hate him. I don't want him on my team. But it's like, if he is on your team, would you not use? Yeah, like you said, like why not make it worth your pain to get some numbers out of it at least?
And I think that could be available. So I'm going to pay close attention to that situation going into the weekend because
they could really use that.
Wise, I think so too. I think he adds a nice little downfield dynamic there potentially. Before we get to our next game, our guy Shamar has been patiently waiting, and I think we should answer their trade question. Would you trade away Drake London, J.K. Dobbins, and Juju Smith-Schuster for one Jahmyr Gibbs?
Unless this is like an 8-team league where the difference between Dobbins and Gibbs would maybe be meaningful with Drake London included. I mean, it's like if you're not really using London and you're not really using Dobbins, then Gibbs is an upgrade for you in a really high bar kind of league, then I guess, but otherwise no for me, because to me, London is not far behind Gibbs, if at all, and then Dobbins is a pretty substantial asset.
Yeah, it's a little bit too much ammo to be giving away, even if, obviously Juju's kind of a throw in that one. I still would kind of stand pat with that particular core that you have there. Shamar, speaking of J.K. Dobbins, he is squaring off against the Browns this week. The Chargers are 1.5-point favorites on the road in this spot. We got an over-under of 43, it looks like, at most shops. Your thoughts on this game and Ladd McConkey's little breakout last week?
Right, that breakout for McConkey was interesting, and also exactly what his peripheral stats would have said was going to happen. It's like, this guy's getting targeted on a per snap basis, such that given a certain catch rate, a certain yards per target assumption, he is going to go off soon because his numbers were lagging, and the peripherals, if they hold, the correction has to occur. And yeah, it's like 130 yards and 2 touchdowns on whatever on 6 targets on like 35 snaps. That's the kind of thing you have reason to believe will happen if those other peripheral stats hold, which they had to, because the Chargers can't throw the ball anywhere else. Even Palmer, who's looking good too, they can't get more than make like a target every 8.5 snaps or something like that to him. So when the tight ends do nothing, which the Chargers tight ends do, they don't do anything as pass catchers, it's just McConkey or Palmer, or nothing happens. And it's been some of the nothing happens. That's been some of the answer this year. But if Palmer and McConkey are healthy, it doesn't need to be. And if Chark comes back, especially, then we're really cooking. But in the meantime, I guess like maybe Fehoko can hold them over until Johnston is back. But Chark, McConkey, Palmer really would have a chance to be the kind of receiver group that Herbert regularly throws for 300 yards with. So hopefully that happens. I don't know if Chark's even coming back this year, but they presumably have to make a call on that soon.
They do. On the Brown side of things, what did we see last week? I think it was pretty stark, the difference in this offense between going from Watson to Jameis Winston, willingness to access the deep parts of the field. We see David Njoku with a strong game. We see Cedric Tillman with his breakout. He's obviously been, someone that was picked up in a lot of spots last week, but now is probably 100% rostered across all leagues and all formats after the type of week that he had. It's not so much to ask like whether this is sustainable from the Browns, that they're going to be, throwing it all over the yard with success every single week, but is that just kind of overall change in philosophy for how the Browns run their offense? Is that going to be something where we can, kind of trust Tillman going forward and also view David Njoku maybe as like a top 7, maybe fringe top 5 type of tight end?
Definitely yes on Njoku. I'm still not sure what fair expectations might be for Tillman. Like his last 2 weeks have been a crazy tear, no doubt. 21 targets on 123 snaps, but the Bengals defense is not that great, and there was kind of a weird script to that one. And even the Ravens game, not that you can take credit away from Tillman, but as far as his projections go, that second touchdown, the game-winning touchdown, doesn't happen if Kyle Hamilton catches that interception. And he was going against Jalen Armour-Davis on that touchdown, things like that. It's like you keep noticing details like these that you can't count on to happen reliably. And I think you have to, given that, acknowledge like Tillman's numbers are great, but they might not be that durable. And whether they are durable, and to the extent that they are durable, is kind of pending like how good he actually is as a wide receiver in the NFL. And the answer could be that he's very good, or some level of acceptable, but we just don't know for sure. I mean, there's crazy outlier cases like Travis Fulgham type situations that happen every so often. So it's at once really encouraging that Tillman has produced the way that he has, and it's also not yet conclusive. Like we need a little bit more, but he was a totally decent prospect out of Tennessee. He's at worst got a good shot. We'll just kind of like see if he's merely serviceable or really a standout player, which is kind of like what he's been the last 2 weeks.
So you often talk about like having perspective when it comes to prospects and how we viewed certain guys at different points in their college careers. And going into 2022 for Tennessee, it was Tillman that was the big deal, and Jalen Hyatt was kind of this, could be interesting, might not be.
Wasn't
Obviously,
Tillman
Hyatt
hurt
and
a lot, like for 2
his
years or 3 years, and that's why he there was like the thing. Well, he would have broke out sooner if he wasn't hurt, and then he went totally nuts for something like 9 games, his second to last year, where he was like the leading receiver in the nation. So yeah, he has a pretty decent history of producing. It's just kind of like every time Tillman produced really well, he was always in the where it becomes kind of like the blurry range of the dimensions, where it's like, well, if he were just a little younger when he caught these passes, we would be able to say like, yes, history says a player who produces like this will be productive in the NFL. Sometimes those players, even when they're in the range where there is no precedent, like Rashid Shaheed, I guess, even though he's hurt, it's like he's an example. You look at his production at Weber State, you wouldn't say this is an NFL receiver, but sometimes guys just have anecdotal explanations for why they didn't do more, and Tillman might have been one of those guys.
Yeah, I think he was dealing with an ankle, I want to say, for a lot of his last season at Tennessee, and it's unfortunate because that offense with Hendon Hooker in his last year was about as scary as it gets, and Tillman could have even added another layer to it, but it did end up getting Jalen Hyatt paid. So all works out in the end. It's good to see that Tillman is starting to break out, and I think that's a good kind of sober analysis of what to expect going forward. Let's jump on over to the Commanders-Giants game. This one up in New York. We remember these two teams played earlier this season in the game where Washington did not score a touchdown, but they won, and the Giants didn't have a kicker. That was a weird game. Now we've kind of gotten a better picture of these two teams, because I believe that was back in week 2. So now the Commanders, they have commanded our respect, I think, to an extent, and certainly against a team like the Giants, who Nick Whalen pointed out on the betting pod, great stat. They've been underdogs in 24 straight games.
That's funny. Yeah, the Giants definitely are that bad. We'll see how the this Tyrone Tracy, his concussion thing. Is there anything new on that?
Just still progressing through the protocol.
So yeah, I don't know. I think even Tracy has kind of been inconclusive. He's definitely made some good plays. It's just, to me, especially in that last game, the Steelers were giving up some uncharacteristically big gaps to run through. Maybe that was the Steelers just being off for no reason. Maybe that was the reflection of the Steelers selling out to deal with Neighbors. Maybe defenses keep selling out to stop Neighbors, and those wide lanes still are there for Tracy. But otherwise, to me, his big plays just kind of looked like what you would project to happen for any player with his 40 time and jumps to have in that situation. And that's to say there's a long list of players who qualify that way, even though Tracy is, of course, more athletic than most running backs. So running backs have done more in bigger stretches and then still disappeared. And so I'm not considering Devin Singletary completely toast. And if Singletary plays at all anyway, then it's that wasn't a big pie that we were splitting up. So I'm kind of pessimistic that anybody will be useful in the Giants running game consistently the rest of the year. Darius Slayton, Neighbors, and Wan'Dale Robinson might be pretty durable, though, because their usages are so specifically, carved out, and they don't encroach on each other's territories. Not that all three can just have big games every week at the same time, but it's they should always be part of what the Giants are prodding the defense with. They'll always go out there seeing if they can get Wan'Dale Robinson some yak underneath. They'll always go out there and try to get 12 targets to Neighbors, and if those two can't get open on those first two, they're always going to go to Slayton to try to make the defense pay for it. So those three guys are all pretty well set up, I think, even if there is no running back. The Washington side, I guess if Brian Robinson's healthier, maybe he can produce again here. But yeah, I guess it's on defenses at this point to see, can you keep that safety over the top of Terry McLaurin? I feel like this should be pretty easy. I still think it's going to happen, but admittedly, it's been I think it's once been a lot of lucky details with the Commanders' offense, and they've of course done well with it. I just think there's still going to be harsh regression at some point.
Yeah, it's just a matter of, are the Giants going to be the one that that forced that. And
weird stuff happens though.
Washington
it's like I don't want to bet on Washington right now because they're not a 6-2 team. They should have, if the Bears weren't complete morons, the Bears would have won that game. And it's like if the Giants weren't stupid, if Joe Shane wasn't such a buffoon that he went into that game against the Washington the first time with no kicker called up, even though he knew Graham Gano was hurt, Washington probably loses that game too. So they definitely deserve the benefit of the doubt more than they did before, but I still think this is much more like, you remember that crap Ben Roethlisberger, late stage Ben Roethlisberger Steelers team that went 8-0 or something to start the year, and people were like, you have to admit that he's still the man, and it was like, he sucks. This is garbage. Not that Daniels is anything like that stage of Roethlisberger's descent, but it's not that meaningful, especially when so much of the league is so poorly run, which we all know it is. Then things like the Washington winning on improbable Hail Marys, I think is like a fair warning of like, it's going to get harder. And, how lucky do you feel if it does? I know a lot of people are like, let it roll. But I don't know. I'm of course sticking to my priors with this, but I still have seen nothing contradicting the projected peripheral stats. And it's like those peripheral stats that the Washington Commanders have, they generally don't hold. So we'll see.
Thinking back to that late stage Roethlisberger, everyone's like, he's getting the ball out. Like he has the shortest snap to throw times. Like, it's like
he's so good at playing hot potato, man.
It's like literally watching a guy play hot potato.
Not that, and again, Daniels is definitely doing a great job, and it's like he did everything perfect on the Hail Mary stuff like that. But it really took Tyreek Stevenson like forgetting what he was supposed to do on the play and forgetting there was a play at all. For this to line up the way it did. And it's like, man, I would be, I'd be buying a lot of lottery tickets that day, but I would not presume to keep winning at that rate afterward, after whatever sorcery wears out.
Bears running a fullback dive with an offensive lineman was while they were losing was truly,
they're the best. They are awesome. Go Bears.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Last game of the early window, we've got the Pats and the Titans. Some quarterback uncertainty on both sides here. We're still kind of waiting to see if Drake May will be available in this one, and Will Levis still working his way back from the shoulder. Frankly, and this is as a guy who kind of held his nose and believed in Will Levis as like a late round quarterback this year in drafts. They look at least almost like an NFL team when Mason Rudolph is out there, whereas Levis was good for just Looney Tunes stuff. So I think it would behoove the Titans to stick with Mason Rudolph until, he turns back into a pumpkin. And I think if I'm on the Titans here, I'd prefer to see Brissett over May. But, I think May's introduction to this game would obviously change things.
Yeah, I still think the Titans defense should be good if guys are healthy, and whatever's going on with Snead lately. I'm not sure. But that defense should have been pretty good. And we always expected the Titans offense to be sketchy at best. But if Mason Rudolph can be some kind of vaguely stabilizing presence, and if the Titans defense can get going a little bit, T'Vondre Sweat, L'Jarius Sneed missing practice, not exactly reassuring on that end. I don't know. The Titans are poorly managed, but they have some talent, whereas I think the Patriots are kind of like reasonably managed and don't have talent, not anywhere other than corner, really. So bad team. Either one can win, either one can lose it. I guess I'll go with the Patriots, though, just because I don't think the Titans can do anything well for very long. And if Mason Rudolph had a good game last week, not even that good, just a lot of yards, I guess you'd say, then I don't think he can throw for a lot of yards the next week, regardless of who they're playing. So but yeah, ugly game, bad football, bad NFL to have these two teams in it.
Yeah, no, that game is. I don't know how much more watchable it is than Saints Panthers in the early window, and that's saying a lot.
What a low point in history! Oh my god.
Ugh. All right, we'll perk back up. We got a fun one out in the desert. We've got Bears Cards. We've got the Cards. 1 point favorites at home. Of course, we just established go Bears, but Your thoughts here. The Cards have, kind of scrappily, made their way to the top of a very weird NFC West to this point. And, they've won 2 games in a row against AFC opponents. The Monday nighter against the Chargers and that win over the Dolphins last week, which is impressive. And Kyler Murray was talking some smack on Twitter afterward. That was pretty funny. The Bears obviously licking their wounds after letting that game slip away. Do you think that game, like a loss like that, has any sort of lingering effects going into this week? And it is, second week in a row on the road and then going all the way across the country.
Yeah, I mean, you saw it with those comments after the game. Matt Eberflus is the kind of character who, when things fail in his jurisdiction, he blames it on his workers. He can never be blamed. He can only be failed. So that kind of culture, you might tolerate it as a player. You might be able to sincerely buy in as a player if you've thought like, whatever, we're winning at least. I'll deal, I'll put up with this. But when you're losing and you're losing in a humiliating way, and your coach is just this, you see him for what he is. He's this small man who is always just going to point fingers instead of, being like Brian Dable, who when the Giants lose, he's like, yeah, it's my fault. It's like, that team sucks. And every week he comes out there when they lose, he says, yeah, it's my fault. And every time the Bears lose, Matt Eberflus goes out there and says, I didn't coach them to do that. They did that. So I think the Bears are kind of at more of a quit watch sort of risk than most losing teams. And I think the Cardinals still have all their issues. I believe they won in spite of their issues last week rather than because they solved any of them. But the Bears have struggled stopping the run. And if Connor can get going, the Cardinals have a shot, particularly in those games, because that's when Kyler can kind of, move around, get that safety to bite a little too far, make them pay with a big play. But the Bears, it's like you can't even count on them to run basic. They're back to when they're not playing the Panthers and the Buccaneers or something. It's like they look like they haven't practiced all week on offense. And that's a Waldron thing. It's like Waldron's not ready. Eberflus isn't ready. This is not a serious team.
On the Bears front, what do you make of how Swift has been playing over the last month or so? It's been
what he was supposed
bankable.
To do. Yeah, right. That's what he was supposed to do. And it's why it's so funny after those first 2 or 3 games or whatever. It's like you could tell it was from the team itself. So probably polls, or maybe it was like a Chad Morton or somebody like that. But somebody put it out there like, yeah, we think we just need to switch it over to Roschon and then it'll all fix itself. And it's like that game before they predicted that is like when Swift went insane against the Rams. And they were like, oh, okay, well, never mind about that. Like, yeah, that's exactly what you should have thought would happen. But the one thing I'll say is Swift's big games have coincided against bad defenses. I don't expect Shane Waldron to have his ship run tight enough to give Swift a fair shot against truly good defenses. Luckily, the Cardinals are bad.
Right. That's the important detail for this week. So I do like some props for Swift. I think I saw his total yardage posted at like 88.5 at BetMGM earlier. I think he can get there. Let's see. Mateo wants to know, and this is a question, we'll unpack it a little bit further in the Sunday night game preview, but for right now, I think it is kind of an interesting one because they're 2 very similar cases, just different points of their career. But who do you like rest of season more, Darnold or Flacco?
Like you said, they're both similar. They're both carried by their teams around them. In the case of Darnold, Jefferson, Addison, hopefully Hawkinson soon. Flacco's case, Pittman, Downs, hopefully Pearson and Mitchell get rolling a little bit. I think I prefer Flacco, though, because neither of them is going to run. And the Colts defense kind of sucks. Like it was bad going into the year. They lost their best corner. I think their pass defense will be bad as long as they have the particular group of players and Gus Bradley that running it. So I'll say Flacco, but in both players' cases, I think you got to worry when they go against a good defense because you can't assume their talent can ever carry them. They always need to be carried by the players around them.
So, yeah, that might be one where it's better or it's going to be helpful to look at the rest of season schedule. Obviously, you would think that Indianapolis being in the division that they're in, a little bit of a smoother ride, but you also, and both of them have dome home stadiums. It's tricky. I think it's an interesting question. I think that there are cases to be made for either. Before we get to our next game, we've got a message from our pals over at Circa. It's football season, and the best place to catch the games is at Circa Resort and Casino in downtown Las Vegas, featuring the best pool in history Stadium Swim. 3 levels, 6 pools, and a 143-foot diagonal screen. Whether it's Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. No matter the size of your group, Stadium Swim is the place for you. From owner suites to cabanas, daybeds to stadium booths, there are seating choices for everyone. And the best part, Stadium Swim is open 365 days a year. With the temperature-controlled pools, it's a great place to catch the games all season long. Stadium Swim, located at Circa Resort and Casino in downtown Las Vegas. Book today at circalasvegas.com. All right, we've got a couple good ones here in the afternoon. We've got Jags-Eagles. Maybe I oversold how good this one is. But the Eagles have actually been, I believe they've been held scoreless in the first quarters of every single game that they've played in this year. And they are 0-4 at home against the spread, dating back to last year when favored by 7 or more points. So slow start, rough time with, kind of playing up to their level or, playing down to their competition a little bit. Do you think that the Jaguars, even though they are extremely banged up right here, have a chance of making this a game?
They should be able to make it a game. The Jaguars, even with their, bad coaches, it's like there's no good reason for them to ever be completely out of games because their team has real talent. A couple things that are difficult for me to think through here. Jalen Carter, Landon Dickerson, both out of practice Wednesday. If either of those two is missing, that's a big deal. Darius Slay, arguably a big deal as well. But Brandon Scherf for the Jags, of course, Christian Kirk is already out. Both of these teams are pretty beat up, which makes it a little more difficult to guess the reasons for fluctuation. But AJ Brown is a constant, and I don't think the way the Jags are running their defense this year is a good idea against him. Like, they're running man coverage more than any team, even with Tyson Campbell there, they don't have the personnel to do it. So when you're against AJ Brown, you have to put a corner on him who's one of your better corners, and you have to put a safety over him all the time. That's just the rule. And it seems like the Jaguars, the way they're running their team, are inclined to test that rule, which will always go wrong for the defense. So I think the Eagles offense carries them a little bit here, maybe, but if it comes to it, they should be able to do that because the Jags defense just isn't even in theory very good.
That's true. But even though they've gotten a little bit healthier on that side of the ball, I still am not sold that it matters on the road against the Eagles. And I think Lawrence has struggled pretty mightily on the road so far this season, like under 6 yards per attempt. So I think this could be a bit of a tricky spot. I'm still not ready to dive in full trust with the Eagles, but I think against the Jags,
there's a lot of bad teams. It's easy to look good, at least occasionally, because there's a lot of teams like the Jaguars and the Bears and the Cardinals and the Saints and so on.
Yeah, some phony records out there, no question about it. We do have an actual good game here, though. We've got the Lions and the Packers, this one at Lambeau. It's supposed to be a bit rainy on Sunday afternoon in Green Bay. Goff has obviously played amazing, but famously, like, if there's one trend that he hasn't really bucked, it's being able to play in the elements.
Yeah, he's a California surfboard guy that can't handle the muddy, rainy confines of Green Bay. But it's a situation that the Lions prepared for. They accounted for it. That's what those running backs are there for. That's what that offensive line is there for. It's like they don't, by design, need Goff to always produce. It's like that. It's something they try to keep on the table, and Ben Johnson does a really great job of setting it up. But this is one of those games where, people wonder why Ben Johnson shows so many trick plays on tape. And the more I think about it, I think it's actually a really good idea. Before, I was always like, well, if you have a trick play, maybe you shouldn't show it so that you can keep the element of surprise. But Ben Johnson puts these like gratuitous trick plays on the field just to keep teams, spending time in meetings like, watch out for this stupid, David Montgomery pass that they're probably never going to run again. But if they do, we need to be ready or else we're all getting fired, so that kind of stuff saps bandwidth really. And Ben Johnson, I have no doubt, will put Goff in the best position he can in this game. But I think the Lions have to win on the ground. They have to win with yards after the catch. Maybe it's like Sam Laporta unleashing here after being kept under wraps for half of a season now. So there are ways the Lions can get around it. And if Love is limited or out, then it's like all the more reason to believe they can get the rare Lions Lambeau win here.
So with what we've just kind of laid out there as far as the offensive game plan for Detroit, where have in your mind like the real strengths been of this Green Bay defense? Obviously, it's been so much better this year under Hafley's direction. So is it something where the Lions, yes, they can turn to the ground game, but it could be tough sledding potentially?
I don't know. The Packers have not been that great against running backs specifically. It's like they've made some timely plays, and they've got a couple guys between the pass rush and the coverage who can make splash plays. Gary, especially Kenny Clark to a lesser extent in the front seven. Jair and those safeties are playing really well, and I include Javon Bullard, who people might look at him and think he is playing badly or something because he got left. This is one of Hafley's few mistakes: is he left Javon Bullard in off coverage with Brian Thomas running clean from the slot, and is like, what is Bullard supposed to do standing like 10 yards off the line with Thomas, knowing if he guesses wrong which way Thomas goes, it's a touchdown. And it's like, yeah, that Thomas beat him there, but Javon Bullard's playing really good. The safeties are playing really good. So the slot coverage, and then wherever Jair Alexander's lining up, the Packers are playing really great. It's that other corner where they're getting beat. I'm sure Ben Johnson is thinking about how to get that corner isolated, but I just don't know if it matters because I think the Packers' run defense has more questions than answers at this point, and the Lions are they're prepared to just call that, like say, we're running it until you stop us, and a lot of defenses are shocked to find they just can't do it against this team with the people they have and the resolve they have to stick with the run.
Yeah, they do have a terrifying run game. It's right up there with the best in the league, and they can kind of hurt you in multiple ways between Gibbs and Montgomery. The Packers intelligentsia, with whom I speak on occasion, they like that Evan Williams guy too.
Right, he's the starting. He's replaced Bullard as the starting safety, so Bullard can specialize on playing slot corner. And those two and McKechnie, they're as good of any three group in that range of the field in the league.
Yeah, it's a nice little trio that they've got there, and two of them are rookies. Nice finds. Let's hit Rams Seahawks. We've got the Rams 1.5 point favorites on the road. In this spot, I can't for the life of me figure out Seattle. I'm not surprised that they lost last week, but I was surprised that they kind of boat raced the Falcons the week before, and they got kind of smoked by the Niners.
No, Metcalf really hurts them though. Like you're playing red zone offense every play without Metcalf. I think Kenneth Walker will have a lot more success in this game than the last one, but the fact is, I don't think the Seahawks can throw without Metcalf, and the Rams, of course, can throw right now. So I'll take the Rams, I guess.
Yeah, I think that any sort of lingering questions we had about the Rams, were kind of answered to an extent in their game against Minnesota. They're back at full strength. They have Cooper Kupp, they have Puka Nacua. It's looking good for them right now. So I do like the Rams in this spot as well. Let's hit Indy versus the Vikes. We've got, as we just talked about, Darnold versus Flacco, two quarterbacks near and dear to my heart. We've got the Vikes 5-point favorites here.
Yeah, the Vikings defense, maybe it only happens against really good play callers like Ben Johnson, but I think we've seen a couple weeks, Matt McVay, the other play caller, they got that Vikings defense to kind of lose its smoke and mirrors for a second there, and then they started pummeling them in the passing game. So we'll see if Brian Flores can counter adjust, get these guys back into the the attack position. But right now, for the last 2 weeks, for the first time all year, the Vikings secondary has been the hunted. So we'll see what happens here. It's not as if Flacco's a world beater. It's not as if Michael Pittman's not healthy. Josh Downs, great as he is playing hurt too. This is not the Colts offense that it could have been. And so maybe the Vikings, kind of regain their composure on defense here. But I do think that the Colts clearly needed to bench Richardson if this is going to be the offense that they run. And I talked before the year, the Colts have no depth in the run game. They should be a run-heavy offense. What's going on? And then it just kind of turned out like, oh, yeah, we're not going to run it if Taylor's hurt, and we're not going to try to make anyone good in the run game other than Taylor's. We're going to run a 3-wide offense with no blocking tight ends, really. It's like, yeah, they put a lot of slack on those 3 receivers. Flacco makes those 3 receivers more productive. Simple as that.
Yeah, he does. It is disappointing ultimately that you have this guy that was known as the project coming in Richardson, and
he should be in the Chip Kelly offense that Daniels has, that Cliff Kingsbury has done a great job with, I have to admit, in Washington. But instead, they're just like, hey, Richardson, you're 22, right? You threw like 180 passes at Florida, right? Simply go run this 40 pass attempt offense better than Joe Flacco. Like, what kind of ridiculous scenario is that? So, yeah, they need Flacco, but it's like their failures have led them here.
100%. Somehow, I mean, they're still 4-4. Like, they could make around the AFC's a little bit weak in the playoff picture, and I think that Flacco helps them win right now. So, I don't know, weird times in Indy, to say the least. Justin has kind of a funky question for us, and then we'll hit the Monday Nighter. Would you offload Marvin Harrison Jr. and Rico Dowdle for Chris Olave and Ramondre Stevenson? I think with Derek Carr being back, I think I would make that move and acquire
Stevenson over Dowdle, of course. Everyone knows
strongly.
That. Yeah.
So I think Stevenson is the guy who I bench, and then he goes off, and I put him back in, and
that's what he's for. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
and Dowdle just doesn't go off when you bench him.
No, he's literally just a wasted roster spot. Finishing it out, we've got the Bucs and the Chiefs. Chiefs 8.5-point favorites at home. The Bucs obviously still kind of figuring things out without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. What did you make of their kind of offensive adjustments last week without those guys?
Is it Liam Cohen? Is that the name of that guy?
Correct.
He's doing a really good job. What was really impressive to me about that Buccaneers game was how much they counter-adjusted, to the situation. They said not just, well, we have the Evans role and the Godwin role, somebody plug into them and be those two guys, please. That's not what his plan was. His plan was like, he reassessed what everyone on hand was capable of, and he looked at it as like, well, Otten can do more than he did before. We use Otten a certain way when Evans and Godwin are here. They're not here. Let's use Otten differently. And Otten was actually a pass-catching tight end at Washington. Like, he was their leading receiver a lot of the time. And so this role they had before last week for Otten, where he was kind of pass blocking, just getting check down type things, he was sort of overqualified for it. So for that reason, I think Otten can keep it going. And not to say this is an easy matchup. The Chiefs defense seems quite good and varied. They're kind of prepared for a lot of different looks. So maybe this is a game where Mayfield can't really get anything going. But Otten, I think, is looking like a top 10 tight end at worst for however long Evans is out, and no worse than like top 12 even when Evans is back.
So the rub here, I feel like, is that the Chiefs defense is quietly incredible.
Yes.
So it could still be a tough matchup for Otten, but I feel like regardless, I think he's probably earned it in most formats, depending on what your tight end set up is looking like. I think that Otten kind of fits as a top 12 tight end for this week. But on the Chiefs side of the ledger, they do have Hopkins now. It's been an up and down, bumpy season offensively for this Chiefs team, but they're still big favorites here against the Bucs. I mean, from a fantasy angle, what's kind of catching your eye on the KC side?
Yeah, I think Hopkins will get going probably in this game, not long from now, whatever the case. Buccaneers run defense has some guys that can be productive, especially if Vita Vea is out there. They can be productive, but they're at kind of a gassing risk. They're going to get tired probably because the Chiefs defense, like you said, is playing great. The Chiefs offense is going to always have the luxury of running however much they want, moving at whatever pace they'd like. So yeah, with both offenses are shorthanded in different ways, but Mahomes versus Mayfield, we know who wins that, and the Chiefs defense is way better.
Yes, it is. So I'm on the Chiefs here. I know that they haven't been great at covering big spreads, but I think that if the Bucs are going to be as shorthanded as they are, it's hard to like them in this spot at Arrowhead. But that's going to do it for us here on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Week 9 edition. Huge thanks to everyone that tuned in on the live stream. Hopefully we got to everybody's questions in a prompt manner, and obviously we got all the questions right, so don't even worry about that. Thanks again to our sponsors over at Underdog, over at DraftKings Pick 6, and over at Circa. For Mario Puig, I'm Fred Flintstone. Thanks for listening.